Now, in terms of as a supervising animator as well and producer, what challenges did you come across in creating an underwater world?
Why don't you go?
Wow. Well,
Plenty, huh?
yeah, the fact that it's underwater, I think, was a real trick. It was really for the animation team figuring out how to make these fish act, how to portray, how to communicate with them. And you know, we had this whole bag of tricks for doing bipedal, like kind of humanistic acting, but then to take those fundamentals and apply them to fish was a real trick. And it's also that fish are in this, the water is really kind of another character that you have to be very conscious of. And that just sitting here now, as I'm gesturing, my body's not moving around in space, but if a fish were to do this, you go underwater and you do this, and your body's going to go 3 feet back. Yeah. And so that was a trick in figuring out this balance, of figuring out how do I communicate with the fish. I want to do arm gesticulations, but I also want it to feel natural so that if the character's gesturing all over the place, their body's not being thrown all over the place. Mm-hmm. So it's really finding this balance of what's good, solid, clear, communicative, entertaining acting versus good, solid physicality. Because you don't want to throw your audience out of the film because something doesn't look integrated within the environment. Yeah. And it was a trick as well, because when we're animating this, we don't see what you see in the end result on the screen. You know, it's not this lush blue environment that's got the particulate matter and the surgeon swell and all this stuff. It's just nothing. You don't see anything of that. And so we really got to think the whole time, well, okay, they're always, you know, if a fish comes up and stops, they have a little bit of a drift to them. And there's always this little kind of a drift going on. But you don't want to make it too much, because then it'll look a little like what we call floaty. Or maybe, you know, your audience members get sick because these things are always moving. Like, oh, I can't track anything. So it's a balance. It's finding this kind of tasteful balance.
And visually, the environment obviously was a huge challenge. That we hadn't done anything like that before. And being able to, the main objective we set out was to convince the audience that there's something between the camera and the subject matter. Not just air, that there's water there. And what does that mean? We actually brought the technical team on 3.5 years ago. And they worked for over 1.5 years to assemble the toolkit that we needed to do that, which included being able to move the whole environment back and forth. We learned a little bit of that in A Bug's Life, a subtle thing. There's wind, and you can see the clover move in the wind. But in this case, it's not just wind moving back and forth. It's you got tides, or and they're moving back and forth in different directions, and so the whole environment has to move. It's obviously an even more lush environment than A Bug's Life in terms of a coral reef, but also extending that to fog as things fall off. And it's not just like fog in the air where things get dimmer. They turn bluer as you get away from things in if you see a friend of yours across the way in a swimming pool, they don't just get a little darker, they get bluer. Also on the ocean floor, all the dappled lighting, the shafts of light coming through the ocean surface, the particulate matter that has to not just float around but move back and forth. And then of course you get particulate matter and you get it in front of characters' faces. You're going to have a whole system for being able to kill individual pieces of particulate matter.
And it's all going to move and act in a very natural manner.
And you do all this, you get all these tools together, and then your goal is to just not see it, in a way. Yeah. You have to feel it. Yeah. You have to feel it and believe it, but you don't want any of those techniques to actually jump out at you in a whiz-bang kind of way, because again, that pulls you out of the story. Mm-hmm. That's not what we want people to do. We want them to be immersed in the environment and feel like they were there for a few hours while the story unfolded for them, but not to spend their time watching the environment at all.
I got you. Now, we talked about the environment. Now let's talk about the actual fish. You went into a little bit about why you chose the clownfish. Why did you choose some of the other characters, and what did you like? What did you have a scientist come in? Did you watch their movements? What exactly did you do?
Absolutely, and you know, we had such a plethora of characters to animate here, and what we would learn, say, about the clownfish, some of it would apply to the blue tangfish, which is Father and Dory's characters respectively, but a lot of it was unique to that one species. So it was kind of like back to the drawing board, and okay, sharks, well, they move very differently than these other fish do. Okay, get him back in here, get the fish expert in here again. Let's get schooled on shark movement now, and then manta rays. Some of it we would look at ourselves, and if it's a character that's not. I mean, animators tend to have a really good notion of motion anyway. I mean, that's what we do when we acting and motion, etc. But So we can look at something and really be able to pick apart, like a manta ray, what's making that thing swim and what those motions are. And we can recreate that with pretty good accuracy. But there's some stuff like even turtles. We'd look at all sorts of like Discovery Channel footage and Blue Planet stuff, and we have just vaults and vaults of footage that we would just sit in rooms and we get all the animation team together and go in the screening room and just play some stuff.
But it's true, you guys never really got a break because in a lot of our films, you get used to the characters. You've built up a library of motions and a whole shorthand for how to describe poses to each other. But this, every time the new scene comes, okay, now you're animating jellyfish. Jellyfish, they do.
Oh.
And now it's turtles that do this, and then a manta ray that does this, and
it's like bloat. The Brian Garrett's
one that
character,
blows
Bloat,
up and
is like mostly with they expend a lot of energy in their fins, and just look like this. And there's like a dirigible. They don't really move very much. It's just this thing. But then Gil is this Moorish idol. They're very like commanding, and they do a flick, and then they just kind of glide, and they kind of have a great presence to them. So you're definitely looking at the real fish, and learning characteristics, and then you're embellishing that and making that caricaturing it, making it entertaining, etc.